Well, this all gets back to the trend in Israeli politics, which has brought theological thugs into the cabinet. Religious Zionism is represented by a map in the Knesset on the wall of the Knesset and by some patches on Israeli army uniforms, which show a greater Israel extending from the Nile to the Euphrates, including Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, parts of Iraq, parts of northern Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, uh, east of the Nile. Um, and here, of course, this is religious humbug because, uh, well, there's several things that are amusing here. One is that the founders of Israel, the Zionist founders of Israel, did not believe in God. They were atheists. And yet they based their claim on God having given Israel the right to this land. Second, of course, if God did do that, he gave it, or maybe she, I don't know, gave it to Abraham. And Abraham is the father of the Arabs as well as the Israelites. So all of this is religious humbug and entirely bogus. But this group are in charge. Listen to Bezalel Smotrich or Ben Gvir, and you will hear ambitions to annex virtually everything on the periphery of Israel. Well, of course. And then, of course, we've seen an Israeli push to exterminate the Palestinians in Gaza, and now aided and abetted, I'm sorry to say, by my own country. Israel, you come from Chicago some of the time at any rate, and in Chicago there are stockyards into which cattle are herded, animals are herded for the slaughter. And the feeding stations that have been set up in Gaza by a joint US-Israeli foundation are designed exactly the same way. And the result is the same. People are funneled into these stockades, and then they're killed by snipers or artillery or whatever. And of course, they don't get enough food to feed their families. And we're now told that children are dying of not just of starvation, but thirst in Gaza. So all of this war, by the way, is a wonderful cover for these incredible cruelties. You said, so anyway, I'll just say that Israel's ambitions are indeed absolute security. And as I said, that brings absolute insecurity to everyone within reach. You're quite right that the Arabs have taken no concrete action. During Mr. Trump's visit to Riyadh and Qatar and the UAE, any discussion of the Palestinian issue was off camera, privately held, and the whole thing was devoted to a celebration of the real estate redevelopment possibilities in the Riviera on the, I call it Auschwitz on the Mediterranean, that Mr. Trump endorsed. This is nothing new. Arab rulers have always had to balance between widespread popular, more than dislike hatred of what the Israelis are doing, serious opposition for what they are doing, and their own interests as rulers. And they have been able to suppress popular demonstrations for the most part, and keep control despite the opposition of their people to their policies. The Gulf Cooperation Council, just to go to your the last part of your question, what are the reactions to the suffering of Iran under this attack? They vary widely. I mean, I think the only Arab country that really is in favor of what Israel is doing and likes it is Syria, where al-Shara, the president, has seen Iran as the prime enemy for a long time and is apparently happy to see Iran, as you said, cut down to size. Elsewhere, that is not the case. Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince and de facto chief executive in Saudi Arabia, just called President Pezeshkian in Tehran and expressed not only his condemnation of Israel and what it's doing, but claimed to speak for the entire Islamic world in expressing solidarity with Iran. So this is something interesting because it bridges the Sunni-Shia divide. And I must say, inside Iran itself, we're seeing shifting politics away from the emphasis on Walad al-Faqih, the theory of theocratic government, and toward a more conventional nationalism in which the army plays a larger role than the Islamic Republican Guard does. And far from disuniting Iranians, the attack on Iran has apparently united them. The level of hatred of Israel has never been as white hot as it is now, and the disappointment and sense of betrayal by the United States never as strong. So we're in a situation in which we see strange things happening because of the disinformation war that I mentioned earlier, of the distortion of the realities. The claim that Iran is on the ropes, as Russia was supposedly in the early stages of the Russia-Ukraine war, and that therefore it's under tremendous pressure to capitulate. We just saw a meeting in Geneva between the descendants of the Crusaders, the British, French, and Germans, and Iran, in which they were pressing Iran to capitulate. And were firmly rejected by Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister. And I think the real question is, why did the Europeans go and talk to Iran? Iran didn't start the war. Israel did. Israel must end the war. Iran has said the minute Israel stops firing things at it and destroying people and assassinating people and committing the aggression it has committed, that Iran will respond by ending its attacks on Israel. So clearly the disruptive element is Israel, not Iran. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union representative at the G7 meeting, or G6+1, I guess, in Canada, in Alberta, claimed that the source of instability in West Asia is Iran. But that is patently false, and everyone knows it is. And so what sort of game are the Europeans playing here? They're playing a Zionist game. And I come back to the fact that Mr. Trump, who I think genuinely did want to solve this issue peacefully, is caught between the Zionists and his own following, who are opposed to a war. The latest polls in the United States show, depending on which one you look at, only 16% or 19% of Americans favoring joining Israel in this war. And majorities, large majorities of Democrats and independents, and even of Republicans on a lesser level, opposed to that. And yet Mr. Trump's donors and Mr. Netanyahu, who seems to have infiltrated Mr. Trump's mind with manufactured intelligence that contradicts that of the CIA and everyone else, he is following the directions of Israel. So here we have an anomaly, and it's one that's deeply humiliating to me as an American. That is that not only is the United States following foreign policies that are dictated by a foreign country and accepting intelligence provided by that foreign country, manufactured intelligence, which is self-interested on the part of that country, over its own intelligence apparatus. But we are actually enforcing censorship on our population on behalf of a foreign country. We are deporting people on behalf of a foreign country. We are attacking our own universities on behalf of a foreign country. This is remarkable. And I think Mr. Trump's constituency is beginning to understand what is going on and is pushing back.
Well, it's the same as with if you were to ask me what leverage does Washington have over Israel, these states have enormous leverage and enormous influence. The question isn't whether or not they have this influence. The question is whether or not they choose to use it. And what we've seen consistently over the past 18 months is that they are invested in their bilateral relationship with Washington and are not prepared to use the influence that they can bring to bear in Washington for the sake of, let's call them regional issues, in this case, ending the genocide in Palestine. Now, just to get to the first part of your question, yes, these states would dearly like to see regime change in Iran. They would love to see the Houthis removed from power in Yemen, but they're also realistic. They have seen the limitations of U.S. and Israeli military might. And while they, may have initially supported these efforts, they have come to the conclusion that they are not going to succeed, and that if they continue, they're going to present real threats to themselves. For example, you could see a situation in which the ceasefires that exist between parties within Yemen and consequently between the Houthis and the Saudis and the Emiratis could break down and missiles would start flying into Saudi and Emirati territory again. And that's something these states would dearly like to avoid. Now, there is one issue, which is that for 18 months we have seen the Arab governments individually and collectively assume the role of inert spectators while Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people and slaughtering Palestinians in their own homeland. That changed somewhat in February of this year when Trump proposed his harebrained Gaza Riviera scheme, because now all of a sudden, Trump was not simply, as with Biden before him, supporting Israel slaughtering Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and to a lesser extent in the West Bank, but was endorsing a proposal to forcibly expel the entire population of the Gaza Strip, and by extension, the West Bank as well, into the Arab world. This forms a direct threat to the national security of the Arab states. This forms a direct threat to the domestic stability of these Arab regimes. This forms a direct threat to the remaining residual legitimacy that these leaders and governments have. And then all of a sudden, you saw them stand up as one and publicly and unanimously and quite vociferously push back and reject that proposal. So they do have leverage. They have enormous leverage. In 1973, for example, you had the oil boycott. They also have leverage in terms of their bilateral relations with Israel, in terms of the diplomatic relations and the peace treaties they have. But for a variety of reasons, they have prioritized the maintenance of their bilateral relations with, first and foremost, Washington, and secondly, with Israel, over any kind of pressure on either Israel or the United States to end this genocidal military campaign.